Welcome to Lunch with the League. I am Rachel Terry. I am the Deputy Director here at the Utah League of Cities and Towns. And we are excited to have you here with us for Lunch with the League. Lunch with the League is a webinar program that happens every first and third Tuesday of the month. We cover topics from land use to law enforcement to leadership. As you can tell at the League, we love alliteration. The next workshop will be on September 20th. It's titled Building Trust with Law Enforcement. We'll have Chief Kyle Whitehead from St. George and Chief Wade Carpenter from Park City. Today, we are talking about the League's new program called Your Land, Your Plan. I know that there are many participants who will be joining us over the next 5 minutes. And the most critical part will be after me. What our agenda is going to be today is I'm going to provide an overview of the Your Land, Your Plan program. Then we'll hear from Meg Ryan, Senior Land Manager for the League. And then we'll hear from Joe Minicozy from Urban 3. And then Meg Townsend from WFRC is going to talk about how the work that they're doing at Wasatch Front Regional Council dovetails with the Your Land, Your Plan program. So with that overview, one thing before I get going, before I dive right in, you can put questions into the chat and we will answer them as we're able throughout the presentation. If it's not during a particular presentation, we will answer those at the end of the presentations. We want to make sure we're providing you the information that you need, so don't be afraid to throw your questions in there. Again, thank you again for being part of this webinar today. I'm going to talk about this new program that the League is sponsoring, Your Land, Your Plan, which is an educational program available to all of you through a generous grant from Intermountain Healthcare and with the support of Zions Bank. It is an educational program to help municipalities better utilize underutilized public real estate assets within their communities. As part of this program, we have 3 main objectives. First is to teach our municipalities how to identify underutilized city-owned land, to demonstrate the value of strategically using public assets and explaining how you use those specific assets to improve the fiscal stability and well-being for your residents. So it's an educational program, and because we have the support of IHC and Zions Bank, we are going to be able to provide a robust and comprehensive program that we don't have to stay at the high level. We're able to give you the high level, the medium level, and really get down into the weeds. And we will be able to connect you with experts like Joe today, Joe Minicozy, who's going to be a partner in the program, to provide you the information that you need. So the first part of it is getting you excited about this work and excited about using these assets within your community to benefit your residents and your city as a whole. And as we do that, we will be connecting you with resources and helping you identify who should participate in each part of this educational program. It's going to include places where you want your elected officials to be engaged so that they understand how this public assets work, dovetails and works for the goals and objectives you have for your city. And there will be parts where it provides technical and practical information and tools so that your planners or whoever is working on that in your city will have real tools. We'll leave this training program with real tools to do the work. It will be robust and it will have experts, national experts, to be a part of the program. One of our partners in developing Your Land, Your Plan is Urban 3 with Joe Minicozy, who is a national expert in urban planning and design. And he'll be presenting today. And I think after you hear from Joe today, you will be as excited as we are about the opportunity to provide you the Your Land, Your Plan program. And Meg Ryan will be able to tell you a little bit more about Urban 3 and Joe in particular. But again, this is going to be a comprehensive, robust training program that is accessible to you through the IHC grant and with the support of Zions Bank. And on October 6th at our convention, you'll get to hear from Zions Bank CEO Scott Anderson, as well as from IHC, who will talk a little bit about the program and their support for municipalities. And then we will open up registration so that you can register for the program. The courses will not start until 2023, first part of 2023. And when they do, we'll be rolling, and we welcome any feedback you have during that program. That gives you an overview of what this looks like. Happy to answer any questions later on, but I'm going to turn the time over to Meg Ryan, the League Senior Land Use Manager.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today after a nice Labor Day weekend. See a lot of faces, or not faces, but names out there. So thanks for joining us. I'm going to talk a little bit before we leap into Joe and then Meg about how this endeavor is going to help you at the local level. So whether you're growing, whether you're built out, whether you're somewhere in the middle, this Your Land, Your Plan, these courses, this engagement that we're going to be launching on is going to speak to all of those municipalities and towns throughout our state. So there'll be angles for city managers, for elected officials, for staff. It's really going to be a comprehensive look at using assets in your community. All right, so quick, I know I can't see your faces, we can't do the hand raise, but a quick stretch of the arms. How many of you have a general plan? Okay, all of you raised your hands. Okay, how many of you have a capital improvements budget? All of you raised your hands. How many, beyond providing basic public services, of you see yourselves as community builders? Again, raised the hands. So what does this asset, looking at assets, have to do with any of those fundamentals that we do in the land use arena, at our cities and towns? Well, this series of courses and Utah-based cases will marry the concept of using publicly owned assets. When I talk about publicly owned, it's not only municipal assets, but it's institutional, it's nonprofits, it's all of those community building efforts that we try to lay the framework for, and looking at how those assets help toward community building and laying the framework for fiscal responsibility, the marriage of those two concepts. Advantages, connections, looking at it with a little different lens. Now we have cities in the state that are already doing this. We're going to be able to use them and their experience as we move throughout the state and finding out about how to connect on these opportunities. And really that's the heart of it. It's tying your general plan, your capital improvement budgets, the basic core land use elements that we use on how to look for new opportunities for our community building purposes. And the man, Joe Minicozy, a principal at Urban 3, is going to be able to really visually show you what I'm trying to articulate. He is the principal of Urban 3. They're based in Asheville, North Carolina, right, Joe? Sorry to get that right.
Yeah.
And they've worked over in 160 communities, 35 states throughout the United States. They attended our conference, I think, 5 years ago or so, and everyone was pretty wowed. They've worked with a lot of communities in our state, but he really helps us reimagine and rethink how to kind of shift the narrative in land use for this fiscal responsibility. With that tee up, I will swing it over to Joe and let him wow you with his visuals.
Thanks, Meg. Y'all can see my screen now, right? Okay. Thanks, Meg. Thanks for the kind introduction. As y'all have heard, I'm got an accent from North Carolina. I'll say y'all a lot, sorry. But Asheville is up in the mountains of North Carolina, about 4 hours north of Atlanta. Blue Ridge Mountains, bluegrass music, lots of beer here. We have 40 breweries in the city, which is kind of insane. And like any quirky little mountain town, we have men dressed as nuns on tall bikes that eat fire. It's not your typical place, but we didn't start this way. Asheville was essentially bombed out in the late 1990s with a lot of buildings that we just left fallow. Asheville suffered a pretty big economic hit after the Depression that it took us 50 years to get out of. We just left these buildings laying here and pretty much gave up on them and didn't even try. There were a lot of people in the 90s that came in, and I'm just going to really shortly make my connection to this town is through this company, Public Interest Projects, which is a for-profit real estate developer doing rehab of buildings downtown. So we would buy a building like this, get an active tenant or a bookstore on the ground floor, but also make apartments upstairs. I was trained as a city planner. I worked in city government, but what was interesting to me in our role here is that we were constantly explaining what did it mean to do downtown rehabilitation to the rest of the community. We're essentially publicly presenting economic data to our community to get them to understand that a city is just a really big real estate development project that's got to work in a very cooperative model. So for us, a city is just a really big real estate development project that has a finite boundary of land. In my state, North Asheville is the only city that isn't allowed to annex land. We have a fun state legislature here, but that means that those acres are all that we have. So back to the real estate development analogy, that if you look up the word incorporate, it says to constitute a company, a city, or other organization as a legal corporation. So by law, my city is incorporated, my county is incorporated, my state, your state is incorporated, but so is our country. Joe Biden said this on the Stephen Colbert show, the United States is the largest corporation in the world. I looked it up. There's the law at the bottom of the slide that lists us as a federal corporation. So thinking of our form of government as that municipal corporation, my city would be 7 times the value of Ted Turner. So does Ted Turner make his decisions based off of biases, or is he looking at data? So the role of doing urban land use economics or any kind of town economics is you have to look at that land like a product. So if you talk to a farmer is always going to talk in economic terms, the water per acre, the labor per acre, et cetera. So let's do the same with our crop called the building. So this is a building that our company rehabbed, or my parent company. We put in ground floor retail, second floor office, and upper stories residential. So the city did the streetscape project. So thank you, city, for that investment. We wouldn't have done that revitalization had it not been for that public realm that the public invested. So it's about $30,000 worth of investment at our front door for that physical stuff. But we took the building from $300,000 of taxable value to $11 million. So what the community realized was a 3,500% increase in taxes on that property. So that crop produced 3,500% more taxes. That's a good thing. But again, people would have biases. You know, they'd say to me, well, Joe, this Walmart over here is 20 million. Fair enough, that's double the value, but realize it took 34 acres of our crop, of our farm, to make that happen versus our 0.2 acres. So if you're just using a gross number of total value, you're missing the point of productivity. So per acre, we're producing 100 times more property taxes than that Walmart per acre. We're producing double the retail taxes, obviously a lot more residents and more jobs. So this is a really simple way of taking off a little bit of the blinders on how we look at real estate to really make it an apples to apples analysis. Now, I want you to realize I'm flying through a lot of information, but don't think that this is complex, scary math that I'm doing here. It's just a unit of measurement. And we already do this when we talk about cars. We don't talk about cars on a miles per tank basis, do we? If we did, we'd all be driving Ford F-150s. Instead, we say miles per gallon, because we all understand that tanks are different sizes. And when you say miles per gallon, the numbers change, and we should all be driving BMW Acetas. So using simple metrics, we'll be doing this throughout the program. What are the simple metrics that you could use in your community? But also, how do you visualize that economics? How do you use that economic thinking with tools that you already have in your government? So I'll give you an analogy. If I want to show you what's going on in your brain, I can do an MRI and show you your brainstem activity is in blue and your creative thought process is in green. So can we do an economic MRI of your county or your community? And this is my county. So this is Buncombe County. Non-taxable land is in gray. So this is Mount Mitchell Federal Park. Down here is Mount Pisgah. Green is low value, purple is high value. So I have low value up here. This big purple blob right there is the Biltmore Estate. That's America's largest house. It's worth $100 million. Again, that's not a fair way of looking at it, because it's who's got an 8,000 acre tract of land with 140,000 square foot house on it? One person. So that's the biggest gas tank. So rather than total value, let's do value per acre. the numbers just, the map just changed. I'll just show it to you in 3D. So with 3D, you can see what's going the most potent. This is our downtown right here of Asheville. We can also see our little cousin of Black Mountain. This is a little village of about 12,000 people, about 10 miles away. You can see its little downtown popping up here. And it's not like they have skyscrapers there. Their tallest building in Black Mountain's 3 stories. But we can also see what's going on. Now, we can also communicate to folks out in Fairview who honestly have no idea what we pay in county taxes, show them. So a lot of this is visually conveying what's going on, looking at the economics and talking about it rather than speaking about it without reinforcement or imagery. Again, when we started doing this 10 years ago, people would say to me, "Let's North Carolina, we're different. Here's Kansas City." Now you can see that Kansas City actually has a multiple downtown situation. They've got 2 actually, but then they sprawl out like crazy. Here's Bozeman, Montana. You can see it's downtown and how they've thickened up. You can see Manchester, New Hampshire, or even some places small as Brevard, North Carolina, which is like 8,000 people. You can see their little downtown popping up here, as well as their sprawl out toward the forest, the Pisgah National Forest over here. As Meg has talked about, we've done work in Utah. This is Weber County with home to Ogden. And here is Ogden in particular. And you can see downtown Ogden, and you can see the growth kind of going north and south from there. And some simple metrics, basically this little building, the cross building on the left, if you had 2 acres of that, it would equal the 15-acre productivity of a Walmart. So it's just being aware of the consequences of land use, but also what's going to net you the biggest bang for your buck. I know this joke doesn't work for anybody under the age of 35, but this is all spatial analysis, how you use your land in your community, and you have to let the data drive what's happening. Before I leave this point, and because I picked on Walmart just a second ago, I need you to understand this isn't about blaming anybody or picking on Walmart. I actually presented at the International Association of Assessing Officers, and this guy presented how cheap Walmarts are to 3,000 assessors at the assessors conference. By the way, it was the squarest conference I've ever been to. Assessors are massive nerds, but it was kind of brilliant that this guy was doing this presentation and showing how cheap his buildings are. The cheaper the building, the lower the taxes. That's really smart. Now, as somebody that worked in government, it sort of frustrated me that the assessors just didn't really care, because the assessors are agnostic. If it's low value, it's low value. They didn't create the tax system, right? So I went up to the microphone and I asked Mr. Terrell, I said, "What's the useful life of one of your buildings?" And he said 15, 20 years. We designed the building to depreciate as fast as possible. We'll build another building and depreciate it down again. And again, remember, y'all just need to realize that this isn't about hating the player. It's about understanding the game. So if you're going to have a tax system based on property valuation, there's going to be an inadvertent reaction to build cheap buildings that fall apart. The life cycle of a Walmart is the life cycle of a cat. Sorry to all the cat people, I'm a dog person, but making a joke here, but you need to understand that this is the value to your corporation. If that's a good investment for you, 15 years, great. If not, if you're in it for a longer haul, you might want to think this through. So this matters for the public, because this is how your wealth is generated and how you can pay for things. If the average Walmart consumes more in police services than it pays in property taxes, you're actually in an upside down position. You're losing money when that Walmart shows up. So just be aware of that. Run the numbers and show it. Also be aware of the other fallacies or quirks that we have inside our municipal system. For one, roads are listed as assets in most communities. Now, in my world, if I had a computer or a delivery van or a piece of real estate, those are assets. I can sell the computer, the van, and the real estate. You can't sell your roads. So those roads really technically aren't assets, or you should look at them as a long perpetual obligation of an asset. So if in real estate, if I were to have this mall as an asset, I know that I need to fix that mall and fix the objects on it, like these air conditioners. Those air conditioners aren't cheap. They're $85,000 a pop. I also need a crew to come out for $35,000 with a sky crane and a bunch of people to move the air conditioners around. So every 15 to 20 years, this is going to cost me about $205,000. So I have to pull away a piece of rent to be able to pay that future cost. I have to build that wealth. I'll give you an idea of how this works in the municipal level. So Lancaster, California, which is up and over the mountain from Los Angeles, way out in the suburbs, they have about 953 miles of roads, which is a lot of lane miles of roads. That's enough to build a road from Los Angeles to Portland. So every 30 years, they have to rebuild that road to Portland. Now, if you were to decide this 100 years ago, would you decide to build a road to Portland if you're a Lancaster? No. So they just accepted these streets over time and grew. And these are when all their roads came in from the early 1900s to today, well, actually, we did this model in 2016. But you can see in 1953, they did a lot of lane miles in 1 year. Well, this comes back to haunt them with the first rebuild in 1983. And what they did is they did what most communities do. They let out more development, annexed more land, but you can see they built more roads. So that 1953 roads comes back for a second rebuild in 2013 and brings along with it the new stuff. So just to show them what their cash flow looks like on just the roads that they're obligated to hold, this is what it looks like for the build-rebuild schedule of all their roads. So we have to be aware of this stuff. You have to account for what you own and what you have, and realize that we didn't do the math back in the 1950s when we did this first expansion. Most communities, when they do their expansions, or if you're newer to this expansion game and you expanded in the 80s or in the early 2000s, you've taken on a lot more infrastructure. And this comes back to haunt you with the first rebuild and gets bigger with the second rebuild. Notice how it's getting even bigger now. And again, we didn't add any new roads to the system. It's just capitalizing on itself. So this is without inflation, without the fact that asphalt has grown in 30% in value in the last year and cost. So this is what happens in a community, is that we build all of this stuff, we flush their money into the system, and you can see where they run out of roads. They can only afford 50% of their roads in their community. So this is something that we all have to account for. This is, we call this a Geo Accounting of the analysis. Think of it this way, that government is set up with a lot of habits. It's an old style of management. It's set up like an old landline system. And the world is adapted to this smart technology that we have. Computer software, Esri is the software that we use that most governments have. We are in a new world, and we have to take new thinking to look at our governments. So how can the government operate like an iPhone? Well, frankly, it's kind of simple. You can use GIS technology to do this stuff. So if this is Eugene, Oregon, and all of its revenue coming out of the ground. If you look at the cost and do the same thing, this is the whole city floating in a lake. And you can see the revenue above the water line, and below the water line is the sunk cost. So if you live over here, this is what you're paying in taxes, and this is what you're costing society. So if you net your costs against your revenue citywide, you can see what's in the black and what's in the red, and you can see that position that you're in is predominantly net negative or subsidized. So to look at the top view of the city, in black is net positive. If you lift this model up like you're looking for a salamander under a rock, you can see where that spread of subsidy is across the whole model. This isn't to blame anybody. This isn't to shame anybody. This isn't about politics. This is about math. And this is about understanding where you're bleeding out and letting the community understand this. So we like to say, find those leaks in your bucket, understand what's going on from an economic standpoint. The technical requirements to doing this kind of stuff, you want to have, basically, it's going to be taking your data that every community has. We sort it out, figure out how to filter it together so you can actually run analysis on it. And then that's where you start to produce graphics and charts of what matters, basically measure what matters, and then work collaboratively to figure it out. Ultimately, to package all this story, when you go out to the public, you need to be able to talk about the story that's your community. Why are you different? Why is Asheville different from Ogden? You know, it's different places, different economic systems, different growth patterns. So everybody's going to be unique in this. So just to close with a Salt Lake example, Ben McAdams was mayor at the time. We worked with his chief of staff on this project, Shalene Gay, who's on this team as well. And basically, what they were trying to figure out was some learning that they picked up from Dag Detter. Dag is from Stockholm, Sweden, and he was advocating public wealth funds. Really simply, in Europe, when they have something like this old hospital, they don't sell the old hospital. They basically convert it to a hotel with a developer and charge a rent on it. And then 70 years later, they're going to get that hospital back, but it's an asset they can build wealth from. This is another example in Europe. This is Hamburg, Germany, where they took a wharf and rented out that wharf with the development, bringing in 10 billion euros worth of investment on a public commodity. Or probably more extreme, also kind of cool, is in Copenhagen, where they're actually doing profit sharing with the developer. So they're making a bet that they believe in their own community. They want to have a revenue stream coming off this public property, but they also want to participate on the upside with the developer. So there's lots of ways you can do this, but first you have to figure out what you own. So back to Salt Lake County, running the whole analysis, looking at what's going on, where the most fertile soil is. You can tell where downtown Salt Lake City is, but also running the retail analysis. You want to understand what's going on with your cash flow, where your best investments are going to be. Secondly, you want to look at your non-taxable stuff, the public wealth, your city buildings, county buildings, churches, all of this that come together for public assets. Now, 50% of the county is non-taxable. There are areas where you just should be off the table. Estuaries, wetlands, the sides of mountains, things that you hold sacrosanct in your community. Every community is going to be different, but when you filter that out, this is the amount of private land. This is the amount of public land that gets filtered out. So we're really only talking about 44 square miles of stuff that's labeled in blue. When you squeeze all of that together, 44 square miles is something about this big side by side with the county. It's still a lot of real estate. So even though we've filtered off a bunch of it, to show you what that 44 square miles looks like, it's basically the size of West Jordan as a community. Now, just to show you a couple of examples, once you find a parcel, what do you do? Now, when we were talking with the folks at the county, one of the things that we started realizing is some property is a better place to start. So the community invested in the regional transit line that runs south from Salt Lake City. There's the transit areas are basically what people can walk from a train station outward, a transit shed, are all these little circles. So that's about 3% of the property area, but inside those little circles is producing 11% of the county's property taxes. So footprint to area of production is pretty good. That's a 1-to-4 ratio of productivity. So it's punching higher than its weight, basically. These are all the parcels going from Salt Lake City downtown on the right, all the way down to Draper City on the left. These are all the public assets. Now, you're not going to redevelop the whole university. That's kind of silly, but that whole university is a public entity. So can you talk with the university? Let's filter this out. There are a couple parcels that were reasonable where you could say, let's work with the university about a cooperative development where there's a private development on public land and you're going to yield taxes out of it. Maybe it's student housing or a mixed use building or something. But there are some parcels and opportunities there. Just by filtering this out, there's still a lot of property along the way, which would yield about 40,000 jobs, 24,000 dwelling units, housing about 58,000 people. But even with discounted rents, affordable housing, artist, business incubation, whatever you want, we discounted it. It's still producing about $13.5 billion of opportunity. To show you one more example of this, this is known as the Fleet Block, which is in Salt Lake City. It's about 1,000 feet from a transit stop. You can see there's a development right here that's already showing you the value of what could happen. So there's a private sector development that's pulling about $10 million an acre. Oops, sorry. And you can just do 4 of those right there if you wanted to. So that's real easy. This is a really simple way of rubber stamping that in and then running the valuation. That's about $80 million. So those are a couple of examples. Let's kind of step up to the whole system again. If you look at all 44 square miles, the current buildings that are on those properties in blue are this black square. So you have a lot of opportunities. So just to add that much more buildings in red here than the rust color, doing about 4.3 square miles of new development, that's going to yield about $45 billion of new taxable opportunity countywide. This could happen in West Jordan. It could be happening in Salt Lake City. It really doesn't matter. This is a whole county portfolio, if you will. So the county's current total value at that time was $131 billion. Imagine having the opportunity to stack 45 billion on top of that. That's a really impressive return. So this is one of the approaches that we'll take with you all to take a look at your portfolios this way, to interrogate yourselves this way and ask these questions. Now, when you have this, what do you do with the math? And I'm going to give you one last example before I time out here. We did a project in Rancho Cucamonga, California, which is at the far edge of Los Angeles. So it's like a lot of communities in Utah that hover around the Salt Lake City kind of like asteroid belt around it. Rancho Cucamonga is very similar. It's a city unto itself, but it's very much part of a long chain of development out of Los Angeles. To give you an idea of scale of how big this area is, I quite didn't understand it, but this is the Inland Empire, which is 2 counties outside of Los Angeles, San Bernardino and Riverside. There's 4.6 million people in that area, and it's 27,000 square miles, which is tantamount to being the entire state of South Carolina, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. I can tell you about Charleston, I can tell you about Greenville. There's a lot of cities in the Inland Empire, and I don't really understand them because they all just ram together as a continuous mass. So this is what it looks like. It just basically, it's pretty suburban, it's pretty flat across the model. You wouldn't know that there's a downtown in there until I highlight it. That's the downtown. So they basically built up their suburbs without building up a downtown. You should have that purple mountain of a downtown, if you will. So a key indicator that we give every community is generally your what you are from a footprint to what you punch in the pocketbook. So it's about 2% of the land area, about 1.5% of the property value. That's on the low end. That's actually less than 1-to-1. So this is one of the patterns that we see. When we talk, when you see one of my presentations, what we're always doing is looking at the data and seeing what the data says to us. Some people may see ants, but if you zoom out, you can see that the ants are making a bridge here on the leaf, that we can see the patterns that are going on. So back to that 1 to less than 1 ratio. The pattern that I'm talking about is a 1-to-6 ratio. So you can see in Brevard, you can tell in its model, it's got a little mountain, but it's also from an area to value standpoint, 1-to-7, and Asheville is a 1-to-6. So back to Rancho Cucamonga, their current value of their downtown is 400 million. It should, if they grew it up the way that they're growing up their suburbs, their downtown should be about $4 billion worth of value. So that's an incredible missed opportunity. So applying that math as a goal and saying, what if we grow our community, but let's grow our downtown up commensurately to what it should be. Let's plan for this and what does it look like? So let's add some buildings and then let's hit the future valuation button and see what it does. And this is what it looks like. So again, today, tomorrow, they could actually grow $2 billion of new value in their property just by messing with 12% of their real estate. So the next steps of this program, again, this is an application of how you could use the math as a planning tool or as a land use tool to invest in that proper infrastructure and get it done. So just to close, we call this methodology Geo Accounting. You know, it's an agnostic approach to looking at numbers in your community, but at a geographic level. And like an accountant, don't judge what's going on. Let the data tell you what's going on. The way that your accountant doesn't care if you buy a boat, right? Your accountant cares if you can afford a boat. So put the numbers on the map. We're going to do the analysis and work this out and let the numbers speak back to us before we move forward. But it's all going to be based on math. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That was terrific. We do have a couple of minutes where you can ask questions. Brandon asks, to use a specific zoning code or amendment?
You could. I mean, if there's a zoning, you know, obviously, like some of the cases where people ask me why is something taller is a spike versus something else. Oftentimes it comes down to parking lots. When you require large parking lots in spaces, particularly in the downtown area, you're essentially adding or subtracting value from the property, because when the assessor goes out and looks at it, parking lots aren't worth a whole heck of a lot, but maybe $50 or 50 cents a square foot in most communities. So you're essentially forcing a discounted valuation on the property. You're essentially shooting yourselves in the foot by requiring that in the zoning code. But it's a habit that most communities have where we just measure that for some reason. So it could be a zoning problem. In many communities, we recommend just getting rid of parking requirements near downtown, but you need to have a parking strategy. Could be on-street parking, and depending on your size, you could do it with a parking structure, which would allow you to do more development in your community that would bring more taxes. So just thinking that kind of stuff through.
Another question is, have you ever evaluated potential ROI or lost revenue for possible zoning change?
Yes, and the Eugene model that I showed of the red black one where you lifted it up and you could see all the subsidy around the bottom of it. That's essentially a return on investment model. And once you have that, you can do use the similar mathematics for any kind of new development. That if you're already seeing those loss patterns, you're going to see them going forward. Some communities, we develop a simple spreadsheet, and maybe we could work that out if that's what this group needs. We can work that out with you all to have like a checklist of what types of questions to ask.
The next question is, could you give some real world examples? I'm not sure.
I just gave you all about 6, but yeah, real world scenarios for what?
Says, can you give some examples to help me? Not a math person, just some real world application. So, I'm not sure in which context, but maybe tailored specifically to maybe to this public assets where you've been able to use that as part of the strategy for what you're talking about.
Yeah, lots of times from a standpoint of what we saw with Salt Lake County, I mean, I only showed you about maybe a couple of minutes worth of a presentation that's actually about a couple hours long, but there's a lot of different examples that we found in Salt Lake County. The Salt Lake City High School is on a transit line near downtown, and they have a driver's education parking lot. It literally, I would say maybe a 15-minute walk to the temple. And there's a driver's education course there. It's like, you could probably find a better place in Salt Lake City to put the driver's education course than that close to downtown. So that's an opportunity cost of about $128,000 a parking space to just let that lot sit there like that. That would be a likely example of, can we just talk with the school about using that property, find them a better property that's actually easier to get to for the high school kids to drive to than in the middle of the city like this. So that would open up a conversation with the school board, again, a partner, it's part of government, to talk with how you could have mutually beneficial goals. That could be student housing or teacher housing right next to the high school, or some other form of revenue stream that could actually contribute to helping this high school. So those are examples that we gave in that. That's just seeing the opportunities that are out there, that have a conversation with the school board.
Thank you. So that was just a little piece of the kind of information that we hope to see in this curriculum that Urban 3 and Joe McCosey and his team are preparing as part of Your Land, Your Plan. We're going to change now, and Megan Townsend from Wasatch Front Regional Council is now going to talk about some of the work that they're doing at WFRC that dovetails into what we're talking about as part of Your Land, Your Plan.
Thank you, Rachel and Joe. Always very interesting to hear you talk about this stuff. It's fascinating to me. The Wasatch Front Regional Council is really glad to be partnering on this with the league. The league has this statewide reach, so we're really happy to see this curriculum being pulled together and to participate when it begins. This effort really, it dovetails very, very nicely with the Wasatch Choice Vision, that I'm sure many of you are familiar with. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen just to give you something to look at here. So the Wasatch Choice Vision is our shared vision for transportation investments, development patterns, and economic opportunities. The vision map and the key strategies show how advancing the visions can enhance quality of life even as we grow. What I want to point out here is that the Wasatch Choice Vision has a few benefits of the vision that just directly relate to this work, including livable and healthy communities, and then certainly including fiscally responsible communities and infrastructure. This effort really digs deep into some of that, creating centers, planning in a way that takes these things into consideration. So there are all kinds of ways that this might shake out for your city. As you listen to Joe's presentation or attend these trainings, I mean, already was mentioned zoning, different market analyses for your city, parking reform, those kinds of things. So the way the Wasatch Front Regional Council really partners in here is with technical assistance. So I want to show you a few programs that might be able to help you with some of this work as you dig in a little deeper. The first of those being the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program. So in the Wasatch Front Regional Council area, That is not the entire state, but within that area, the Transportation and Land Use Connection Program might be a resource to you. This is a partnership with the Wasatch Front Regional Council, Salt Lake County, UDOT, and UTA. And the program provides planning technical assistance to do all of these things we're talking about here. You can take, I'm going to drop the links to all of these websites in the chat. You can take a look at the program goals, and the application for this program and the others I'm talking about here is approaching quickly. So if you have an idea now, it's a good time to reach out. So if you are outside the Wasatch Front Regional Council area, the Mountain Land Association of Governments is building a similar program. It'll be called the TAG program, Technical Assistance for Governments. I will drop that link as well. And the goals of that program are just about the same. So, and then statewide, UDOT has their Technical Planning Assistance Program. Again, the goals are very similar. And actually that program, program shares an application with the TLC program. So lots of opportunities here for technical assistance. As you dive into this training, we'll be there with you and there to help and point out opportunities for some financial resources to help you do this work.
All right, thanks, Meg. So one thing to make sure everyone understands is we are working through this Your Land, Your Plan. Some of the examples we've talked about today are more urban, larger city specific, but the Your Land, Your Plan program is for all of our cities and towns throughout the state. This really is designed so that you can acquire the tools you need, whatever kind of city or town you may be in, and whatever sort of challenges that you are facing, that we can provide you resources and tools and connect you with experts who can help you build out those skills so that you can do this work within your own communities, whatever size that might be. Joe, one of the questions that came up today was, do you have any examples for some of this work you've done in a smaller town?
Yeah, let me, sorry, I speak in pictures, so I hope you don't mind if I just grab the screen for a second.
Please.
Let's see. Brevard, North Carolina is a community of 8,000 people. Let's see if I can find the full Brevard show real quick. It's 8,000 people. It's about, I'd say 2 hours, or it's about 45 minutes west of Asheville. Sorry, I've got to find out which show it's in. And we've done this in a lot of different places. And one of the things I try to help folks try to understand is that cities are all have similar DNA, the same way that people have similar DNA. But if you wanted to see me when I was a baby, I'm gonna, I've got my baby picture, but I look at my grandfather or my father as examples of where I'm growing. So this is Brevard. This is its model. The mayor, he was mayor for 30 years. His name was Mayor Jimmy, and he had a hardware store on Main Street. And when Mayor Jimmy saw this, he goes, well, we're doing a stormwater thing. Could you do a same thing with the stormwater so we could look at it? And again, back to geography, cities and towns, rural places, it's all based on geography. How much width are you versus your density of people? So here's their tax system. And then we just ran a stormwater model of how do they shed water. So you've got to pay for the pipes to get this water out of the community. So out of the downtown is highly impervious. It sheds water, and there's all the water flowing out of downtown. But we modeled the whole rest of the city so you could see the suburban area. And we dropped this model on top of the downtown, or the tax model, like a Jello mold, and you could see the taxes shooting through for the downtown. So these folks are mountain people. So we talk mountain. We're like, all right, let's just look at your community like a mountain profile. Here's your tax system, your money coming out of the ground, and here's your water impervious. So there's a problem here when you've got all this extra watershed coming out. So in the downtown, you can clearly see that there's an opportunity that they can produce enough revenue to pay for it. It's actually popping through. So what do you do in this part of the downtown? Is it change your parking system or build a parking structure to get more density to pay more taxes. But out here at the Strip, you can see it's a totally different system. You have a lot of impervious surface, huge parking lots with big buildings with big roofs on them shedding water, so which causes for big pipes to move that water. But you can see they pay very little tax production out of it. So this is maybe a different policy out there. Charge a different rate for your stormwater fees than you do in the downtown. So just again, at a really small level, this is just 8,000 people. Just talk about it in a simple way to understand it, get your mind around this. But we see big cities making these same mistakes where they charge one stormwater fee through the whole city without thinking through the geographic problems they're creating. But this is an example. Again, I just want to show you a small town example with Brevard. Does that work? We'll be
Yes.
mindful through the program to make sure that we hit us with all of your questions. These are the matters that I'm struggling with. This is what I want to learn from the course. Anything you could throw at us, we'll try to find examples or ways to handle those questions. So this is a process we're all working out together.
So if anyone has any more questions, let us know. Just as a
There is,
recap-
Rachel, there is
Yeah,
a question
okay.
in, Gary Crane, our esteemed colleague from Layton, is asking how do local sales tax, auto dealerships, big boxes, et cetera, and other non-property tax revenues affect your models?
I kind of like went through it fast, but we did the whole sales tax generation model. Actually, you know what? There's one right here that I'm going to show you that we did in one of my favorite models was Durango, Colorado. Let me go ahead and share that. Colorado is kind of quirky. Durango is a good model because Durango is in the southwest corner of the state. Y'all probably know where Durango is. Pretty isolated, so it's a good model because it's all by itself in the county. But the counties run mostly off the property taxes, so the counties get the lion's share of the property taxes. The cities get the lion's share of the retail taxes. Cities in Colorado are way more retail tax dependent than in Utah. But here's their property tax model. And so, you know, when you're seeing this kind of productivity out of the downtown, the counties should be all about helping the downtown happen because they're getting all of that property tax. South Durango is where the mall, the Home Depot, all that stuff down here in the strip down here. Here's the retail model. So you can see that the downtown is still crushing it from a retail standpoint, doing way better than South Durango. This is putting the two of them together and seeing total productivity. We measured jobs. But what was fun about this project is we got a couple business owners that opened their books to us so we could share that. We weren't allowed to do an apples to apples comparison without their disclosure. So Tim and Peter have on Main Street a bookshop and a coffee store. So we compared them to the big box. So here's the footprint difference. Here's the footprint difference between the two. Here's the property taxes. So who'd have thought that these two small businesses are 15 times the property tax production and 7 times the retail tax? So this is agnostic. These are their numbers. This is how it's working. They also have more jobs. So when I presented this in Colorado, I asked the audience, I said, who's paying their retail sector employees more per hour? Is it the coffee shop and the bookstore, or is it Walmart? Chances are it's going to be the little mom and pop that's paying their employees more per hour. It's probably going to be like a nickel more, but it's going to be more. Now let's ask the next question of local economics. Who's hiring the local website designer, the local attorney, the local accountant? Is it the blue side or is it the gray side? It's the blue side. And again, this isn't to vilify Walmart. Don't hate the player, hate the game. Local businesses are dependent upon each other, where a large company like Walmart can centralize their legal department in New York City or something like that. That's just the way that the system works. So be aware of that exchange in your community, but do the numbers to see it first.
Okay. There are lots of questions, some of which we cannot answer today, such as data regarding some of Utah cities and some of those projects. So, Joe, another question is, are you available for consulting? So if you want to drop your contact information,
Okay.
in the chat, feel free to do that. So to wrap up, we're getting to the conclusion of this webinar. Lots of questions. As you can see, Joe is very good at what he does, and what makes him particularly good at what he does is he can take complicated concepts and distill them into visual trainings, educational opportunities, so that you can really see what you're working on and what you need to work on. Your Land, Your Plan is a program specifically designed to provide this educational opportunity to our cities and towns that is specifically targeted on how to better utilize the public assets within your city or town. It's how do you use them to achieve the goals that you have for your community, to help make your communities more fiscally strong, to make fiscally stronger, and to make them healthier. And it is to utilize those underutilized public real estate assets in doing that. And we are going to be partnering with Urban 3, which is Joe Minicosi and his team, to create these trainings so that they can have those opportunities to learn the actual skills and to have real tools, robust tools, toolbox for doing this kind of work. There's one more question. Joe, we have one more question. Does a community need to hire consultants to do this, or are there tools available without consulting?
It depends on the community. Most cities and towns, and pretty much every county uses Esri software. It's ESRI is what it's kind of known by, Esri, people call it. But it's basically, think of it as the tablecloth that sits on top of your table that everybody puts their data on. So if parcel data, property information, it's a pretty sophisticated software. I don't even know how to use it. Even though we're a partner, I've got some great talented folks here at the office, but most planning departments, most county governments, they have these tools and they have this software. We just go in and kind of gather it up. Where we excel is trying to find ways to show the data, because it can get complex and nerdy really fast. And my comment to everybody is just don't overthink this. Again, go back to that car gasoline mile per gallon analogy. You just want to have some simple ways of looking at stuff, and then just be curious. Realize that all of our systems of government weren't set up by, omnipotent forces. These are humans coming up with ways of doing things. So you're going to find practices that are just standards of practice of the way that we've always done things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's right for today's purposes. So just be curious, go into this. And again, you don't have to have super sophisticated software to do this. When I first started doing this stuff, I was literally just opening up people's county databases and just picking properties and dividing the value by its acreage and doing something as simple as that to just get an idea of what's going on from value standpoint. But we can make that as part, actually, these are great questions for part of the curriculum is how do we do this without software? And maybe that should be one of the training pieces.
Meg Ryan, did you want to jump
I
in?
was just going to echo what Joe said. That'll be part of this is a roadmap to accessing the data for use within your local community.
Well, I want to thank everyone for being on this webinar. There's a lot of information, and there's even more information to come. I want to thank WFRC for being a part of it. We invited them because they have some technical assistance available to those within their purview. Also, MAG does as well, and I think they said it was UTA. And so we want to introduce you to, or UDOT, we want to introduce you to these resources that already exist within the state. And that'll be part of the Your Land, Your Plan, is introducing you to the different resources that already exist within the state that can benefit your community as you try to think through how to strategically utilize the public assets that already exist within your city or town. If you have feedback or questions or want to share with us ideas of things that you're interested in seeing as part of this educational program, we welcome them. You can email them to me, rterry@ulct.org, or you can send them to Meg Ryan. Meg, I don't have what is Meg's email?
mryan@ulct.org. It's all available on our website. You can find all of us there.
That's right. You can find us there. So please don't hesitate to reach out and say, as you develop this curriculum, we're interested in this. We are currently in the process of working through the curriculum in partnership with Urban 3, and we are excited to roll this out. We hope that you will get your communities, your electeds, your planners, those who need to know this information, that you will get them excited about this opportunity. And again, want to thank Zions Bank and Intermountain Healthcare for providing the support to make this happen. This webinar will be available on our website shortly after. So if you have others that you think will benefit from this webinar, please direct them to our website. And thank you again, Meg Ryan, Meg Townsend, and Joe Minicozy for being here with us today and sharing so much valuable information. And we look forward to working with you on this project moving forward.